The first time Amelia Davenport saw the palace at Westminster, she thought it was the most beautiful and most terrifying sight she'd ever beheld. Standing in the shadows of its Gothic spires, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon her shoulders, threatening to crush her modest aspirations beneath layers of tradition and aristocratic disdain. "Remember what your father taught you," her mother had whispered before Amelia boarded the carriage in Sussex. "Your hands may be those of a physician's daughter, but when they touch those keys, they become the hands of angels." April 1887 was unseasonably cold, and Amelia clutched her woolen coat tightly as she was escorted through a side entrance, appropriate for her station. She had come to be a piano teacher to Lady Charlotte, the 14-year-old daughter of the Duke of Harrington, a cousin to the Queen. How a middle-class girl from Sussex had secured such a position remained a mystery to everyone, including Amelia herself. "You'll be staying in the Eastern Wing," said Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, a stern woman with eyes that seemed to catalogue every flaw in Amelia's appearance. "You'll take your meals in your quarters unless otherwise instructed. Lady Charlotte's lessons will begin tomorrow at 10. Amelia nodded, trying to hide how her hands trembled. "Is there a piano I might practice on tonight? I'd like to prepare properly for tomorrow." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly. "The music room is reserved for family and guests of appropriate standing, Miss Davenport." "I see," Amelia replied, swallowing her disappointment. "Perhaps there's a smaller instrument somewhere?" "Even a clavichord would. There is a pianoforte in the servants' hall," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, "though it's dreadfully out of tune. The footmen use it occasionally on their half-days." "That would be perfect, thank you." Later that evening, after unpacking her meagre belongings, Amelia made her way down the servants' stairs to the hall. The ancient pianoforte sat forgotten in a corner, its yellowed keys reminiscent of a neglected smile. She ran her fingers across them, wincing at the discordant sounds. "It's been waiting for someone like you," a voice said from behind her. Amelia turned to find a tall man watching her from the doorway. His attire suggested he wasn't a servant, though he wasn't dressed formally enough to be a member of the aristocracy. His hair was dark, with a hint of silver at the temples, and his eyes were keen with intelligence. "I beg your pardon," she asked. "The pianoforte," he said, stepping into the room. "It's been waiting for someone who actually cares about music, rather than just making noise." "Are you saying I don't make noise, sir?" Amelia asked with a slight smile, her fingers still resting on the keys. "I haven't heard you play yet, Miss Davenport." Amelia Davenport, Lady Charlotte's new piano instructor. A look of surprise crossed his face. "Ah, the mysterious new teacher from Sussex. The household staff has been whispering about you all day." "Nothing favorable, I imagine," Amelia said. "Nothing conclusive," he replied. "Though there is much speculation about how someone so young secured such a position." "And you are, sir?" He hesitated, as if deciding whether to answer truthfully. "Lawrence Norwood. I'm a friend of the family." "Well, Mr. Norwood, since you seem curious about my qualifications, perhaps you'd like to hear me play." Amelia's voice was steadier than she felt. She hadn't intended to perform for anyone tonight, but something about this man's scrutiny made her want to prove herself. "I would indeed, Miss Davenport." Amelia took a deep breath and began to play. Despite the instrument's poor condition, her fingers coaxed a haunting melody from the worn keys, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her as it had since childhood. When she finished, the room remained silent for several seconds. "Well," Lawrence Norwood said finally, "it seems the Duke's choice wasn't as peculiar as everyone believes." "Thank you, I think," Amelia replied, uncertain whether she'd been complimented or merely assessed. "May I ask who taught you?" "My father initially, then Professor Johannes Brahms during his visit to London several years ago." Lawrence's eyes widened. "Brahms himself? That's rather extraordinary." "He stayed with friends near our home in Sussex for a summer." "I was fortunate." Amelia stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Norwood, I should retire. Tomorrow will be a demanding day." Of course, he said, stepping aside to let her pass. Though I wonder if you might indulge my curiosity on one more matter. Amelia paused at the doorway. Yes? How did a physician's daughter from Sussex come to be recommended to the Duke of Harrington? She smiled slightly. That, Mr. Norwood, remains between the Duke and myself. With that, she left him standing beside the old pianoforte, his expression caught between admiration and suspicion. The following morning, Amelia met her young student in a small drawing room that had been designated for their lessons. Lady Charlotte was a pale, slender girl with none of the vibrancy one might expect from a child of 14. "Good morning, Lady Charlotte," Amelia said with a curtsy. "I'm Miss Davenport, your new piano instructor." "You're much younger than I expected," the girl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm 22, Amelia said. And you 14, I believe." Charlotte nodded, studying her hands. "Father says I must learn to play properly before my debut in 2 years' time." "Do you enjoy playing?" Amelia asked, sitting beside the girl on the piano bench. "I've never been particularly good at it," Charlotte admitted. "My last 3 instructors gave up on me." "Well, I don't give up easily," Amelia assured her. "Shall we begin?" Over the next hour, Amelia discovered that Charlotte's previous teachers had done her a disservice. The girl had been taught to play mechanically, without any connection to the music itself. Her fingers moved correctly, but her playing lacked soul. "Lady Charlotte," Amelia said gently, "when you play, what do you think about?" The girl looked confused. "I think about getting the notes right." "That's important, certainly," Amelia nodded. "But music is more than just correct notes. It's about feelings, about stories. When I play, I imagine I'm speaking without words, telling the listener something I couldn't express otherwise." Charlotte frowned. "Father says a lady should express very little." "Perhaps in conversation," Amelia replied. "But at the piano, you're allowed to speak freely. That's the magic of music." Before Charlotte could respond, the door opened, and a distinguished gentleman entered. By his bearing and the way Charlotte immediately stiffened, Amelia knew this must be the Duke of Harrington. "Your Grace," she said, rising to curtsy deeply. "Miss Davenport," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I trust my daughter is progressing satisfactorily." "We've only just begun, Your Grace, but Lady Charlotte shows promise." The Duke's gaze was evaluating, much like his friend Mr. Norwood's had been the night before. "I selected you because I was assured your methods produce results where others fail. I expect to see evidence of this soon." "Of course, Your Grace." The Duke turned to his daughter. "Charlotte, your mother requires your presence for a fitting. We'll be attending the Queen's garden party next month." "Yes, Father," Charlotte replied, rising obediently. After they departed, Amelia remained at the piano, playing softly to calm her nerves. The Duke's expectations weighed heavily, as did the mystery of her appointment. She had told Lawrence Norwood the truth, she didn't know why she'd been selected. The letter had arrived unexpectedly, offering her the position without interview or audition. That was Schubert, wasn't it? Amelia startled, her fingers faltering on the keys. Lawrence Norwood stood in the doorway again, watching her with those perceptive eyes. "Yes, his impromptu in G-flat major," she answered. "You seem to have a habit of appearing silently, Mr. Norwood." "My apologies," he said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. "I was on my way to speak with the Duke when I heard you playing. It seems you have a tendency to find pianos wherever you go." "It's an occupational necessity," Amelia replied. "Though I'd appreciate not being observed without my knowledge." "Fair enough," he conceded. "Did you meet with His Grace this morning?" "Briefly. He seems to have high expectations for Lady Charlotte's progress." Lawrence's expression grew serious. "The Duke is not a man who accepts failure graciously, Miss Davenport. Whatever recommendation brought you here won't protect you if you disappoint him." "I'm aware of my precarious position, Mr. Norwood," Amelia said, gathering her sheet music. "Though I'm curious why you feel compelled to warn me." He hesitated. Let's just say I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself once. Talent doesn't always protect one in these circles. And what circles do you move in, exactly? She asked. You're clearly not a servant, yet you speak as someone who understands their vulnerabilities. A shadow crossed his face. I'm the Duke's secretary and legal advisor. I was once as new to these halls as you are now. I see, Amelia said, though she sensed there was more to his story. Well, thank you for your concern, but I intend to succeed with Lady Charlotte. I hope you do, he replied. For both your sakes. Over the following weeks, Amelia's life settled into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to Charlotte's lessons, afternoons to her own practice on the servants' hall pianoforte, and evenings to writing letters home to her mother. She rarely interacted with the household beyond Mrs. Patterson and the occasional servant. Lawrence Norwood, however, seemed to cross her path with increasing frequency. Sometimes he would listen silently to her playing in the servants' hall, other times, he would engage her in conversation about music or literature. Despite his formal manner, Amelia found herself looking forward to these encounters. One evening in late April, she was practicing when he appeared with a small package in his hands. Miss Davenport, he greeted her. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, she replied. I was just finishing. I brought you something, he said, extending the package. A small token of appreciation for your patience with that dreadful instrument. Curious, Amelia unwrapped the parcel to find a collection of sheet music, Mendelssohn's Songs Without Words. These are beautiful additions, she said, genuinely touched. But I can't accept such a gift. It's not a gift, Lawrence insisted. Consider it a loan from the Duke's library. These pieces have been gathering dust for years. Amelia knew she should refuse, but the temptation of new music was too great. Thank you, Mr. Norwood. I'll take excellent care of them. I know you will, he said, his usually guarded expression softening. Perhaps you might play one for me sometime. I'd be happy to, she agreed, then added impulsively, though I'd much rather play on a properly tuned piano. Lawrence smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. That might be arranged, under the right circumstances. Before she could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by the entrance of several footmen coming off duty. Lawrence bid her a hasty good night and departed, leaving Amelia to wonder about his cryptic remark. The answer came 3 nights later in the form of a note slipped under her door, * the music room will be unoccupied between 10 and 11 tonight. The family is attending Lady Westmoreland's soirée. If you wish to play on a proper instrument, this might be your only opportunity. L.N. * Amelia knew she shouldn't accept. Being discovered in the family's private music room could cost her her position. And yet, the thought of playing on a fine piano again was irresistible. At precisely 10 o'clock, she made her way through the quiet corridors to the music room. Lawrence was waiting inside, standing beside a magnificent Broadwood grand piano. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. Neither was I, Amelia admitted. This is terribly improper. Only if we're discovered, he replied. Which we won't be if you keep your playing to a reasonable volume. Amelia approached the piano reverently, running her fingers lightly over its polished surface. It's beautiful. It was a gift from the Prince of Wales to the Duchess on her 40th birthday, Lawrence explained. Barely played since then, I'm afraid. What a waste, Amelia whispered, sitting at the bench. The moment her fingers touched the keys, she forgot everything else, the risk, the impropriety, even Lawrence's presence. She began to play the Mendelssohn he had given her, losing herself in the music. When she finished, she looked up to find Lawrence watching her with an expression of profound emotion. You play as if the music lives inside you, he said softly. My father used to say the same thing, she replied, suddenly conscious of how close they were sitting on the bench. Tell me about him, Lawrence said. Your father? Amelia hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing. He was a country doctor in Sussex. He loved music almost as much as medicine. He taught me to play when I was 4 years old. Was Lawrence asked gently. He died last year. Typhoid fever, contracted from a patient. I'm sorry, Lawrence said, and she could tell he meant it. Is that why you took this position? To support your mother. Amelia nodded. We lost our home when he died. His practice was our only income. And yet you speak of him with such joy. Because he was joyful, Amelia smiled. Even in his hardest days, he found beauty in music. He used to say that when I played, I reminded him that not everything beautiful in this world belongs exclusively to the wealthy. Lawrence's expression changed subtly. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Amelia agreed. Now, since you've asked about my family, might I inquire about yours? A shadow crossed his face. There's little to tell. My father was a solicitor in York. I studied law at Cambridge and found employment with the Duke upon graduation. And your mother? Died when I was young, he said shortly, then changed the subject. You should play something else before we need to leave. Amelia recognized his deflection but didn't press. Instead, she turned back to the piano and began playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. The piece was challenging, filled with emotional contrasts, and she lost herself in it completely. When she finished, she was surprised to see tears in Lawrence's eyes. He blinked them away quickly. We should go, he said, his voice rough. It's nearly 11. As they made their way back through the dark corridors, Lawrence suddenly took her arm, pulling her into an alcove. Before she could protest, the sound of voices drifted toward them. The family had returned early. They stood pressed together in the shadows, hardly daring to breathe as the Duke and Duchess passed by, discussing the evening's events. Lawrence's body was warm against hers, his heart beat rapid beneath the fine wool of his jacket. When the voices faded, he released her. That was close, he whispered. I'll make sure the corridor to your room is clear. Thank you, Amelia replied, uncomfortably aware of how her body had responded to his proximity. Miss Davenport, he said hesitantly, I hope you don't think I arranged this evening with any improper intentions. Of course not, she assured him. You gave me a gift more precious than you know. Something in his expression softened. Perhaps we might arrange another evening like this sometime. That would be lovely, she replied, though she knew she should refuse. The corridor was indeed clear, and they parted at her door with formal goodnights that belied the intimacy they had just shared, not physical intimacy, but the deeper connection of two souls who understand each other's passion for music. As spring bloomed into summer, Amelia's relationship with Lawrence deepened through their clandestine musical evenings. They were always careful to maintain propriety, yet there was no denying the growing attraction between them. Meanwhile, Charlotte's playing improved remarkably. The girl had begun to connect emotionally with the music, much to her father's satisfaction. One afternoon in June, as their lesson concluded, Charlotte surprised Amelia with a question. Miss Davenport, do you believe in love? Amelia blinked. That's rather a philosophical question, Lady Charlotte. It's just that I overheard my parents discussing my potential suitors, the girl explained. Father says I must marry according to my station, but Mother says there should be some affection as well. And what do you think? Amelia asked carefully. Charlotte's pale face flushed. I think I'd like to marry someone who looks at me the way Mr. Norwood looks at you when you play. Amelia felt her own cheeks grow warm. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, Charlotte insisted. He watches you like you're playing just for him. Even Father has noticed. This alarmed Amelia. The Duke has commented on Mr. Norwood's behavior. Not directly, Charlotte said. He simply mentioned to Mother that Mr. Norwood seems unusually interested in my piano lessons lately. Before Amelia could respond, Mrs. Patterson appeared at the door. Miss Davenport, His Grace wishes to speak with you in his study immediately. Amelia's stomach clenched with anxiety. Of course. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. The Duke's study was an imposing room lined with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. He sat behind a massive desk, reviewing papers as Amelia entered. You wish to see me, Your Grace, she asked, curtsying. Yes, Miss Davenport, he replied without looking up. I've received a letter from Her Majesty's household. The Queen is hosting a musical evening next month at Windsor Castle, and Lady Charlotte has been invited to perform. Amelia's eyes widened. That's a great honor, Your Grace. Indeed, the Duke agreed, finally looking at her. It's also a testament to your teaching. Lady Charlotte's progress has exceeded my expectations. Thank you, Your Grace. Lady Charlotte is a dedicated student. The Duke studied her for a moment. Tell me, Miss Davenport, how did you come to be recommended to me? Amelia felt her pulse quicken. I'm afraid I don't know, sir. The letter offering me the position came as a complete surprise. The Duke said thoughtfully. And you never questioned this stroke of good fortune? I was grateful for the opportunity, Amelia replied carefully. My father's death left my mother and me in difficult circumstances. Yes, Dr. Davenport of Sussex, the Duke nodded. A well-respected physician, I understand. And an outspoken advocate for public health reforms. Amelia was surprised by the Duke's knowledge of her father. Yes, he was passionate about improving conditions for the poor. Some might call his views rather radical, the Duke observed. He wrote several articles criticizing the aristocracy's indifference to the suffering of the lower classes. My father believed that all people deserve dignity, regardless of their station, Amelia said, lifting her chin slightly. The Duke's expression remained unreadable. Yet here you are, his daughter, employed in an aristocratic household. I go where the music takes me, Your Grace, she answered honestly. Unexpectedly, the Duke smiled. A diplomatic answer. I can see why Lawrence finds you intriguing. Amelia felt her cheeks flush. Mr. Norwood and I share an appreciation for music, nothing more. Come now, Miss Davenport, the Duke said, leaning back in his chair. We both know that's not entirely true. My staff has reported your evening meetings in the music room. Amelia's heart sank. Your Grace, I can explain, he held up a hand to silence her. I'm not concerned about your musical assignations, Miss Davenport. Lawrence is a grown man, and you are both unmarried adults. What concerns me is whether this friendship might interfere with your duties to Lady Charlotte, particularly with this royal performance approaching. It will not, Your Grace, Amelia assured him firmly. Lady Charlotte's musical education remains my primary focus. Good, the Duke nodded. Because I expect her to perform flawlessly for the Queen. Her future prospects could be significantly enhanced by a successful appearance. I understand, Your Grace. Do you? He asked, his tone sharpening. Lady Charlotte represents generations of noble lineage. Her marriage will forge alliances that strengthen our family's position. This is not a matter of mere musical accomplishment. Of course, Your Grace. The Duke dismissed her with a wave, but as she reached the door, he spoke again. One more thing, Miss Davenport. Lawrence comes from respectable but modest stock. He has risen through ability and my patronage. It would be unfortunate if he were distracted from his duties by inappropriate attachments. The threat was veiled but clear. I understand, Your Grace. I'm glad we understand each other, he replied. You may go. That evening, Amelia didn't go to the servants' hall to practice. Instead, she remained in her room, writing a long letter to her mother. She didn't mention Lawrence or the Duke's warning, focusing instead on Charlotte's upcoming performance at Windsor Castle. A soft knock interrupted her writing. Opening the door, she found Lawrence standing there, concern evident on his face. May I come in? He asked. That would be inappropriate, she replied, though she longed to invite him in. Then perhaps we could speak in the garden? It's still light outside, and there would be nothing improper about a conversation among the roses. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. Let me get my shawl. The palace gardens were beautiful in the evening light, with formal hedges and colourful flower beds creating private alcoves for conversation. They walked in silence for several minutes before Lawrence spoke. "The Duke summoned me to his study this afternoon," he said. "After your meeting with him." "I suspected he might," Amelia replied. "He reminded me of my obligations to the family," Lawrence continued, "and of how precarious my position would be without his patronage." Amelia stopped walking, turning to face him. "He warned me as well. About distracting you from your duties." Lawrence's expression hardened. "He has no right to interfere in our personal lives." "Doesn't he?" Amelia asked sadly. "We're both dependent on his goodwill. I for my livelihood, and you for your professional standing." "That doesn't give him ownership of our hearts," Lawrence insisted, taking her hands in his. "Perhaps not," she conceded. "But it gives him considerable influence over our futures." "Amelia," he said softly, using her given name for the first time, "I need to tell you something. About how you came to be employed here." She looked up at him, suddenly understanding. "It was you, wasn't it? You recommended me to the Duke." Lawrence nodded. "I heard you play at a charity concert in London last year. Your father was being honored posthumously for his work with typhoid patients. You performed Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata." "I remember," Amelia said. "It was the first time I'd played in public since father died." "Your performance moved me to tears," Lawrence admitted. "Afterwards, I inquired about you and learned of your circumstances. When Lady Charlotte's previous instructor resigned, I suggested to the Duke that you might be suitable." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "At first, I wanted to observe you objectively, to ensure my recommendation was sound," he explained. "Then, as I came to know you, I feared you might think I had ulterior motives." "And did you?" she asked quietly. Lawrence's gaze was steady. "Not initially. But now, Amelia, I find myself caring for you in ways I never anticipated." Her heart raced at his confession. "Lawrence, we must be practical. The Duke has made his expectations clear." "The Duke is not an unreasonable man," Lawrence argued. "If Charlotte performs well for the Queen, his gratitude might extend to greater tolerance of our friendship." "And if she doesn't?" Amelia pressed. "Then we'll face that together," he replied. "But for now, let's focus on preparing Charlotte. Everything else can wait until after the royal performance." Amelia nodded, knowing he was right. They needed to proceed cautiously, for Charlotte's sake as well as their own. The following weeks were consumed with preparations for the Windsor Castle performance. Charlotte practiced diligently, her playing improving daily. The Duke monitored her progress closely, occasionally sitting in on lessons with an evaluative eye. Amelia and Lawrence maintained a careful distance in public, limiting their interactions to brief, formal exchanges. Only Charlotte seemed aware of the tension between them, watching them with knowing eyes when they thought no one was looking. 3 days before the royal performance, disaster struck. Charlotte awoke with a fever and violent cough, the beginning of influenza. The royal physician was summoned, and he prescribed complete bed rest. "Her condition is not critical," he assured the Duke and Duchess, "but she cannot possibly perform at Windsor in 3 days' time." The Duke was furious. "This is unacceptable. The Queen herself is expecting to hear Charlotte play. To withdraw now would be a terrible embarrassment." "Perhaps," the Duchess suggested hesitantly, "Miss Davenport could perform in Charlotte's place. She is, after all, the architect of Charlotte's improvement." "A commoner representing our family before the Queen," the Duke scoffed. "It's preposterous." "Your Grace," Lawrence interjected carefully, "Miss Davenport's playing is exceptional. Having her perform as Lady Charlotte's instructor might actually enhance your family's prestige, demonstrating your patronage of genuine artistic talent." The Duke's eyes narrowed. "Of course you would suggest that, Lawrence." "It's not without precedent," Lawrence persisted. "The Duchess of Devonshire had her daughter's art tutor exhibit at court last season." After much debate, the Duke reluctantly agreed. "Very well. But she must be properly presented. The Duchess will oversee appropriate attire, and you, Lawrence, will accompany her to Windsor to ensure she conducts herself suitably." That evening, Amelia was summoned to the Duchess's sitting room, where Lawrence was already waiting. The Duchess, a gentler person than her husband, smiled kindly at Amelia. "Miss Davenport, Mr. Norwood has explained the situation regarding the royal performance," she said. "Are you prepared to play before the Queen?" "I will do my best to honor your family, Your Grace," Amelia replied. "Good," the Duchess nodded. "Now, about your appearance. You'll need something more suitable than your current wardrobe. My personal seamstress will alter one of my gowns for you." Amelia was overwhelmed by the Duchess's generosity. "That's incredibly kind, Your Grace, but I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," the Duchess interrupted. "You'll be representing our family. Besides, Charlotte is quite fond of you and would be disappointed if you weren't properly attired." Lawrence remained silent during this exchange, but his eyes conveyed both pride and concern. As Amelia was leaving, he managed to whisper, "Meet me in the music room at 10. That night, they reviewed the program for Windsor. Amelia would perform Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu, challenging pieces that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. "You're ready for this," Lawrence assured her as she practiced. "Your playing has always been extraordinary." "It's not my playing that concerns me," Amelia admitted. "It's everything else, the protocol, the etiquette, the scrutiny." Lawrence took her hands. "Just focus on the music. That's what matters most." "And after Windsor?" she asked quietly. "What then?" His eyes held hers steadily. "After Windsor, we'll decide our future together, whatever that may be." The journey to Windsor Castle 3 days later was tense. The Duke travelled separately with the Duchess, while Amelia rode with Lawrence in a second carriage. He used the time to coach her on royal etiquette. "You'll curtsy deeply when presented to Her Majesty," he explained. "Address her as Your Majesty initially, then thereafter. Speak only when spoken to." Amelia nodded, her stomach twisting with nerves. "What if she dislikes my playing?" "The Queen appreciates genuine talent," Lawrence assured her. "Just play as you always do, with your heart." Windsor Castle was even more imposing than Westminster Palace. As they were led through its ancient corridors to the music room where the performance would take place, Amelia felt increasingly out of place despite her borrowed finery, a deep blue evening gown that the Duchess's seamstress had altered to fit her perfectly. The music room was filled with aristocracy, dukes, duchesses, earls, and countesses, all gathered for the Queen's entertainment. Amelia was to perform after dinner, during the evening's musical program. As they waited, Lawrence remained by her side, a steadying presence. "Remember," he whispered, "you belong here as much as anyone. Your talent has earned you this place." Queen Victoria entered the music room after dinner, and the assembled guests bowed and curtsied deeply. She was smaller than Amelia had imagined, dressed in black as always, but with an undeniable air of authority. The Duke of Harrington approached the Queen, explaining the change in performers due to Lady Charlotte's illness. Her Majesty listened impassively, then nodded her acceptance. "We shall be interested to hear this talented instructor," she declared. "Bring her forward." Amelia was presented to the Queen, executing a perfect curtsy as Lawrence had taught her. "Your Majesty," she murmured. "Miss Davenport," the Queen acknowledged. "We understand you have achieved remarkable results with Lady Charlotte." "Lady Charlotte is a dedicated student," Amelia replied. "The credit belongs to her diligence." The Queen's expression softened slightly. "Modesty is commendable, but false modesty is tiresome. We shall judge your abilities for ourselves." With that, Amelia was directed to the magnificent grand piano at the center of the room. As she seated herself, she caught Lawrence's eye across the room. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Amelia began to play the Moonlight Sonata. The first movement flowed from her fingers like liquid silver, the haunting melody filling the room with its gentle melancholy. She closed her eyes, letting the music speak through her as her father had taught her. When she opened them again, she saw the Queen leaning forward slightly, her usual stoic expression softened with interest. Emboldened, Amelia moved into the second movement with greater confidence, and by the time she reached the passionate final movement, she had forgotten her audience entirely, lost in the storm of Beethoven's creation. As the final notes faded, the room remained silent for several seconds before erupting in applause. The Queen herself nodded approvingly, a rare sign of royal enthusiasm. Without pausing, Amelia launched into Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu, her fingers flying across the keys with precision and emotion. This time, she kept her eyes open, and what she saw astonished her. The aristocratic audience was genuinely moved. The Duchess of Devonshire dabbed at her eyes, while Lord Salisbury nodded in rhythm with the music. When she finished, the applause was immediate and effusive. The Queen gestured for Amelia to approach the royal chair. "You play with remarkable feeling, Miss Davenport," Her Majesty said. "Where did you study?" "With my father, and briefly with Professor Brahms," Amelia replied. "Brahms," the Queen raised her eyebrows. "He is not known for taking students." "It was a fortunate circumstance, He was visiting friends near our home in Sussex." "And your father?" "He was a musician." "A physician, Dr. Edward Davenport of Sussex." The Queen's expression changed subtly. "Dr. Davenport. We remember that name. He wrote extensively on improving sanitation in poor districts." "Yes," Amelia confirmed, surprised by the Queen's knowledge. "We read his treatise on typhoid prevention. Most insightful." The Queen turned to the Duke of Harrington. "Your family has shown excellent judgment in securing Miss Davenport's services, Duke. Lady Charlotte is fortunate indeed." "Thank you, Your Majesty," the Duke replied, looking somewhat stunned by this turn of events. The Queen addressed Amelia once more. "You will continue your good work with Lady Charlotte, Miss Davenport. And perhaps you might consider a performance at the palace during the Christmas season? We should like to hear you play again." "It would be my greatest honor," Amelia replied, curtsying deeply. As the evening progressed, Amelia found herself approached by numerous members of the aristocracy, all eager to compliment her playing and inquire about her teaching methods. The Duke watched these interactions with growing astonishment, while the Duchess smiled approvingly. Lawrence managed to join her briefly as refreshments were being served. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "Everyone is talking about you." "It doesn't feel real," Amelia admitted. "This morning I was a piano teacher of questionable background, and now the Queen has requested I play at Christmas." "It was always real," Lawrence replied. "Your talent was simply waiting to be recognized by those who matter." Before they could continue their conversation, the Duke approached them. "Miss Davenport, you have exceeded all expectations this evening," he said formally. "Her Majesty's approval is no small achievement." "Thank you, Your Grace," Amelia replied. "I'm grateful for the opportunity you provided." The Duke studied them both for a moment. "Lawrence, when we return to London, I should like to speak with you about your future with our household." "And yours as well, Miss Davenport." With that cryptic statement, he rejoined his wife, leaving Amelia and Lawrence exchanging worried glances. The return to London the following day was strained with anticipation. The Duke had said nothing further about his intended conversation, and both Amelia and Lawrence feared the worst, that despite her success at Windsor, the Duke might still object to their relationship. Upon their arrival, Charlotte was waiting eagerly for news, her health improved enough to sit up in bed. "Miss Davenport," she exclaimed when Amelia visited her. "Mother says you were brilliant. The Queen herself requested you for Christmas." It was quite an evening, Amelia admitted, sitting beside Charlotte's bed. "But I wish it had been you playing instead." "I don't," Charlotte said honestly. "I would have been terrified. Besides, now everyone knows how talented you are. Perhaps Father will finally understand why Mr. Norwood looks at you the way he does." "Lady Charlotte," Amelia scolded gently. "You mustn't say such things." "Why not?" "It's true," the girl insisted. "And I think it's romantic." Before Amelia could respond, a footman appeared at the door. Miss Davenport, His Grace requests your presence in his study immediately. Mr. Norwood is already there. Amelia's heart pounded as she made her way to the Duke's study. What awaited her there? Dismissal? Approval? Something else entirely? Lawrence was indeed waiting with the Duke, his expression carefully neutral. The Duke himself sat behind his desk, reviewing a document that he set aside as Amelia entered. Miss Davenport, he acknowledged. Please be seated. She took the chair beside Lawrence, keeping her gaze steady despite her inner turmoil. I've been considering the events of last night, the Duke began. Your performance at Windsor has elevated our family's standing with Her Majesty. The Duchess tells me that several influential families have already inquired about securing your services for their own daughters. I'm honored by their interest, Your Grace, Amelia replied, but my commitment is to Lady Charlotte. Yes, well, that brings me to the purpose of this meeting, the Duke continued. Lawrence has been in my employ for 7 years. During that time, he has proven himself indispensable in managing my legal affairs. Lawrence remained silent, though Amelia could sense his tension. Recently, the Duke said, I offered him the opportunity to establish his own legal practice with my patronage. He declined, citing personal reasons for wanting to remain in my household. Amelia glanced at Lawrence, surprised by this revelation. I believe I now understand those reasons, the Duke said dryly. The question before us is whether your attachment can be reconciled with your respective duties. Your Grace, Lawrence began, but the Duke held up a hand to silence him. Let me finish, Lawrence. Miss Davenport's performance last night demonstrated that talent transcends social boundaries. The Queen herself recognized this. It would be hypocritical of me to acknowledge her musical gifts while rejecting her suitability as a match for my most trusted advisor. Amelia could scarcely believe what she was hearing. Your Grace, are you saying? I am saying, Miss Davenport, that while I cannot wholeheartedly approve a match between you and Lawrence, neither will I actively oppose it. The Duke's expression remained stern, but there was a hint of resignation in his tone. Lawrence's position within my household secures him a respectable standing, and your royal recognition elevates you somewhat above your birth. Lawrence finally spoke. Thank you, Your Grace. Your understanding means a great deal to both of us. Don't thank me yet, the Duke cautioned. There are conditions. Miss Davenport will continue as Lady Charlotte's instructor until her debut. Additionally, she will fulfill the Queen's request to perform at Christmas. Your marriage, should you choose to pursue one, must wait until these obligations are met. Of course, Your Grace, Amelia agreed quickly. Lady Charlotte's education remains my priority. Good, the Duke nodded. Then we understand each other. You may go. Outside the study, Lawrence took Amelia's hands in his eyes shining with emotion. Did that just happen? He asked in disbelief. I think it did, she replied, equally stunned. Though I'm not entirely sure what that was. It was the Duke's way of giving his blessing without admitting he was wrong, Lawrence explained with a smile. It's as close to approval as we could have hoped for. But he mentioned marriage, Amelia said hesitantly. We've never discussed. Lawrence's expression grew serious. Amelia, from the first moment I heard you play, something inside me recognized you. Not just your talent, but your soul. I've been falling in love with you since that charity concert, long before you even knew I existed. Lawrence, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. I don't have a ring yet, he continued, and according to the Duke, we must wait some months before making anything official. But if you're willing to accept a lawyer of modest background who happens to be utterly captivated by your music and your spirit, I would be honored to make you my wife when the time comes. Amelia's heart felt too full to contain her joy. I accept, she said simply. Though I warn you, our home will always be filled with music. I'm counting on it, Lawrence replied, raising her hand to his lips. 3 days later, Amelia sat at the piano in the music room, playing for Charlotte, who had recovered enough to resume her lessons. The Duchess entered quietly, watching them with approval. Lady Charlotte, you're making wonderful progress, she commented as the girl completed a difficult passage. Thank you, Mother, Charlotte replied. Miss Davenport says I might be ready to play for small gatherings by Christmas. Speaking of Christmas, the Duchess said, turning to Amelia, I've spoken with His Grace about your performance for the Queen. We've decided that Lawrence should accompany you to the palace as your official escort. Amelia blushed. That's very kind, Your Grace. It seems appropriate, the Duchess replied with a knowing smile. Especially given the circumstances. Charlotte looked between them curiously. What circumstances? The Duchess patted her daughter's hand. Miss Davenport and Mr. Norwood have reached an understanding. After your debut next year, they will be married. Charlotte's face lit up with delight. Really? Oh, Miss Davenport, that's wonderful. Thank you, Lady Charlotte, Amelia replied, touched by the girl's genuine happiness. Will you still be my teacher after you're married? Charlotte asked anxiously. For as long as you wish, Amelia assured her. Music brought me into this household, and music will remain my connection to it, regardless of my personal circumstances. The Duchess nodded approvingly. Well said, Miss Davenport. Now, Charlotte, perhaps you might play that Clementi piece again? I believe your father would be impressed by your progress. As Charlotte returned to the piano, Amelia caught sight of Lawrence standing in the doorway, watching them with undisguised affection. He had been right, she realized. Her talent had earned her a place in this world that once seemed beyond her reach. But it was love, unexpected, challenging, and beautiful, that had transformed that place into home.